Straight Life by Art and Lori Pepper. This is episode 19 in my reading of Straight Life. In episode 18, Art was playing with the Kenton Band, and he described his meeting with his fan club. In episode 19, he talks about his sexual addiction. This is Art's narrative. Sex was in my thoughts all the time. And because of my upbringing, I felt it was evil. That made it even more attractive to me, and the alcohol and the pills I took made my sex drive even stronger. I was obsessed. I used to room with different guys in the band, but if I had the money, I'd room alone so I could fool around with the maids. The maid didn't exist for me as a person, so there was nothing Patty could be jealous of. Sometimes they would suck on me or something like that. But what I really wanted wasn't the consummation. I was away from Patty, and so that I wouldn't go out and goof, I wanted to have these experiences which would provide me with vivid mental pictures I could conjure up at will whenever I set about relieving myself by playing with myself. If I was rooming alone, I would wait for the maid to come. I'd peek out the door to see if she was there. I'd leave the door locked. Then she'd think I wasn't in the room. I would lie on the bed and expose myself. I'd fix the covers so the maid would see my joint. I'd pretend I was asleep and put my fingers over my eyes so I could peek out at her. And she'd come in and turn on the lights and look and see me, and I used to wig out with their reactions. Some of them would go, "Oh," and practically run out. Some would act nonchalant and just walk out. Others would stand and stare. Some would get nervous and uptight, but they'd be aroused. And then, after they'd leave, I'd throw a robe on and run out and say, "Do you want to get the room now?" Down south, the maids were great. They went along with whatever you wanted because they were afraid for their jobs and they were kind of naive. I'd say, "Well, come on, if you want to get the room, get it now." Or I'd make up an excuse saying I had to do this or that, or somebody was coming, anything to get them in there. Then I'd sit down on a chair and fix it so my robe was open just enough so they could see me. And I would offer them a drink and talk to them. I'd peek at them while they cleaned the bathtub. Usually in New York, the chicks were too hep. I didn't even bother with them. If you came on, they'd say, "Yeah, sure, if you want something, give me $5. And I'd never do that. But one morning at the Forest Hotel, a maid knocked on the door and she said, "It's late and I'd like to get the room. It's the last on the floor. I'll be able to go home after." She was beautiful. She was some Latin type with light olive skin. She was about 30 years old and voluptuous. That word really describes this maid. She had on a black uniform with buttons down the front. It was made out of some light silky stuff, and I noticed that the button at the bottom was open. And the button at the top was open. I said, "Go ahead." She had green eyes. I'll never forget that. Black hair and green eyes. I sat in a chair opposite the bathroom door. The door had a full-length mirror on it, and it was opened in such a way that I could see her in the mirror. But I was half in a daze. I really wasn't paying much attention because I had a heavy hangover. When I woke up, I always had a hangover, and if I could get to a bar, I'd have a Bloody Mary. If not, I'd have a few shots in my room. So I was having a drink when I looked up and looked into this mirror, and I couldn't believe my eyes. She was cleaning the toilet bowl. She was standing, bent over, but with her knees straight, which caused her dress to come up almost over her rear end. And she had black lace panties on. They usually wear white pants, something durable. She had these sexy panties on, and I could see the beginning of this little mound and some wispy black hairs. sticking out the sides of these little panties. She had gorgeous legs. It was a beautiful sight, and I thought, this is too good to be true. When she came in, she'd close the door behind her. Some of them leave the door open a little bit. When they leave it open, you've got to sneak over and try to push it closed and catch their reaction if there is one. You hope there's no reaction. I went and stood in the bathroom door just looking at her. She is cleaning away. After she finishes the toilet, she bends over to get the floor. She's wearing one of those half brassieres, and with that button loose, I can see her breasts. I can see everything but the nipple. I can see down her dress to her navel. Needless to say, I've got an erection. I move a little closer to her, and she bends over the bathtub, and her uniform is all the way up over her ass. It was too much for me. I had my drink in my left hand. I put my right hand inside my robe and started playing with myself. If you can picture this, I'm standing in the bathroom right behind this beautiful creature who's bent over so her ass is practically in my face with those lace panties, with the hair sticking out of the panties, and I'm jerking myself off, and I came that way, and as soon as I came, I looked down, and she was looking at me through her legs. Her hand was on her cunt, and she was rubbing her cunt. I went to the closet, got an old shirt, and wiped myself off. I went back and sat in my chair. I poured another drink. She kept rubbing her cunt, and I guess she came, because she stopped, pulled her dress down, and finished cleaning the bathroom. She came out. She made the bed. Never a word passed between us. Then, as she started to leave, she turned and said, "Is there anything else?" I said, "No, that was great." She gave me a smile, walked out, and closed the door. I checked out the next day. I felt as long as I didn't know a chick and nothing was said, then there was no love involved and I wouldn't feel as guilty. I used to go to all-night movie houses and sit next to some chick and rub my leg against her leg. And I've had chicks jerk me off and I've played with them. And then I'd just get up and walk out. A lot of times the girl would say, "Let's go to my place," or something like that. I'd say, "Just a minute, I have to go to the bathroom." And then I'd sneak away and go to another theater to try to find another chick to sit next to because I didn't want to ball them. I spent hours and hours fooling with the maids and fantasizing and playing with myself and going to all-night movies. I was going insane. I had a little drill I carried with me. I'd bore holes in the doors in the hotels and then peep into the next room at night and watch the people make love. I was playing with Kenton's band in L.A. on West Broadway at a nightclub. We did an afternoon job, and then we had a few hours off before our night job at the same club. Everybody was eating or fucking around, so I went for a walk. I was in my band uniform. I walked down the residential streets near the club, and it was just dusk, right before the street lights go on. When I walked, I always watched the windows. When lights went on, I'd go over to see if anything was happening. So I was walking, and I saw a light go on in a bathroom window. There was a driveway next to the window. I'd hardly ever walk into a driveway, but I noticed there was a house in the back, so I'd have an excuse for being there. I walked back by this window. It was open, and I heard water running, so I knew it was a bathing scene. I didn't know if it was a man or a woman, and I tried to peek in, but the window was too high to stand and see. Down at the bottom level, near the ground, there was a kind of vent. It had little slats where I could put my foot, so I stood on it and reached up to the sill. I peered in. It was a woman. She was in a brassiere and panties, and she was evidently going to take a bath. The tub was right under the window, and the toilet was to the left. The wash basin was to the right, and there was a little scale. She got off the scale, and then she stood looking in the mirror over the wash basin. This chick was very pretty. She had blonde hair and white skin, and when she took off her bra and panties, I saw she had blonde hair on her cunt, and her nipples were hard. I thought, what am I doing, man? What if somebody sees me or the slats break and I fall? But I was all fired up. I held onto the sill and peeked in. She's standing in front of the mirror. She takes her breasts and hefts them in her hands, and then she rubs them around in a circular motion, looking at herself in the mirror, and she starts to get a glazed expression, and she rubs and tweaks at her nipples with her fingers. She does this for a little while, and then she runs to turn off the bath water. She stands and looks at herself. She starts rubbing her cunt, rubbing down her legs and rubbing her cunt. She sits on the toilet and spreads her legs and takes the first 2 fingers of her left hand and rubs up and down on her cunt. And she closes her eyes and she's got her head back. And with her other hand, she's tweaking her nipple. And she starts quivering and shaking. And then she holds her hand real hard on her cunt. And I guess she had come. And then she got up and looked at herself again and kissed those 2 fingers, which really turned me on. I just couldn't help myself. I had unzipped my fly and reached in and grabbed my joint and started rubbing across the bottom of my joint, and I came right about the same time she did. And then I really panicked. She got up and got into the tub, and I jumped down to the ground, and I was scared to death. I thought, what if somebody's seen me? What if somebody looked out a window and called the police? I got back to the club and sneaked into the bathroom. I had come all over my shorts and the top of my pants. I wiped myself off, and when I buttoned my coat, it covered the area. I felt awful, and I thought, what's happening to me? What would Stan think and the guys in the band? I thought, I've got to stop this. Heroin stopped it for me.